story of Andina is really the story of my family. Like a lot of entrepreneurial stories, it has a combination of both serendipity and strategy. So it starts really with my parents, the happy accident of my parents meeting in Peru. My dad is an Oregonian, third generation, grew up in Portland, joined the Peace Corps, went down for a tour of duty to Peru, and ended up falling in love with the country and staying 12 years. Met my mother, they worked together, they got married, they had a couple of kids, myself included, moved back to Corvallis, where my dad got his engineering degree. And that's where I grew up. So like a lot of mixed ethnic immigrant families, I grew up in an environment where we spoke Spanish at home. We ate Peruvian food at home. It was kind of an island in this larger, sea of normality. So I think a couple of things were planted at that age that factored into, I suppose, my entrepreneurial development. One was this need to try and integrate these two sides of my family and my own history, which is sort of a puzzle that I'd always been trying to work out. And the second one was an appreciation, a deep, deep appreciation for what Peru was and represented, and what it could share with the rest of the world. So all of this led me eventually to major in anthropology in college. I came out of that college experience thinking I would go into international development. That seemed sort of a next step. And as appropriately enough, I came here to Mercy Corps. So this is where the story of Andina starts. Like a lot of other entrepreneurs, I didn't go through the formal application process with Mercy Corps. I basically talked my way into a job as an assessment coordinator, going down to Peru, working on new project development there. And again, serendipitously, because Mercy Corps didn't have any programs at the time in Peru, I was to find my own funding. And I got in touch with a Mercy Corps donor who was a Peruvian businessman who had been working at Intel for a long time, wanted to go on entrepreneurship, and he became a close friend and my fiscal sponsor, Jaime Saavedra, and eventually my business partner. Because when I came back from Peru, I was looking for things to do. The program I had was sort of on ice at the time. The USAID was holding off on it, and I didn't know what was the next step. And he pulled me aside and said, I have this crazy idea, but I want you to help me with it. He's like, I want to open a Peruvian restaurant in Portland. And I thought he was nuts. But then I thought back to my family history, and I thought, well, this is actually an interesting opportunity. This could be a way to create a platform to explore all the different facets of my own personal life that I had been wanting to try and resolve in some ways. It was a great way for the family to portray its culture, to find a way to, through cuisine, tell the story of Peru, open the door into the wild and wonderful world of Peru. And so we went forward. It was, there was really, like any process, it was highly iterative. We started out, we needed a chef. I was looking for connections back to Peru, and as luck would have it, Mercy Corps' direct supervisor at the time for my program was an old hand from Peru, had worked in CARE International there for many years, had dated a Peruvian guy whose nephews were these two chefs who had just been working in Spain, doing their internships and stage tours at 3 Michelin establishments, and one of them was looking for a job. And so I called him up and said, have you ever been to Portland, Oregon? He had no idea where it was. But I said, you've been in San Sebastian. It's like San Sebastian, it's like it's the same parallel, it's green, it's lovely. So, never mind, we don't speak Spanish, but whatever. So, and he came out here, of course, in the summer, when it was beautiful. And he fell in love with the town. He brought his young wife with him. My mother charmed them. And he made him feel at home, and he's like, let's do it, let's open a restaurant. So we had a chef. We had an experienced business person / manager who was the money. And there was me, this young rookie, basically, willing to do whatever it takes for very little pay. And we hired also an old, we call in the industry a cookie, somebody who's been a cook and a chef for a lifetime as a consultant. Someone to basically just shore up our lack of experience. So it was a very cobbled together team, very unlikely team. But we had the basic ingredients to bake this cake. But it also almost never happened. We went we were all over the place. We were questioning whether we wanted to be in Portland. We went down to Newport, and at one time we were seized with this notion, which would have been a disaster, of opening a ceviche shack in Newport, right there on the wharf. And then we thought, well, people don't know ceviche, and it will only be open in the summer, and now that doesn't work. But eventually, again, we found our current space in the Pearl, which had just been vacated. A new owner had taken care of the building, done a full seismic retrofit. There was a blank space there ready for us. And again, serendipitously, this owner had traveled widely and loved Peru and was enthusiastic about the idea of including us in his new building. So, we made every mistake in the book, quite honestly. I mean, if there was a mistake to be made, we made it. And we survived, I would say, that arduous startup process due to a variety of different factors. There's always luck. There was hard work, of course, and willingness to work insane hours for next to nothing. There was, good food, good service. I mean, you got to have those two ingredients, and which improved over time. There was, a sense of dedication to the mission, but more importantly, I think, for our story, was that we had a family, a committed family of individuals who were willing to work and work very hard and do things that weren't necessarily rational in terms of a calculation, a return, to make this thing happen. And now, 10 years later, we've built this strong foundation. Thanks to the SBA, we've got a loan that we purchased the building that we operate in finally, so we're now able to do a huge, an additional seismic retrofit, more renovation that we've needed to make our operations more efficient. We've built a strong private dining business, which is a huge part, fastest growing part of our business, in fact. By necessity, we had to build a proprietary supply chain out of Peru because we couldn't find the ingredients here, not in the quality or the quantity that we needed to run a large-scale operation. So we have direct trade relationships with farmers down in Peru, which is another avenue of growth. You can add value to that. And we've also developed a strong local brand with a strong set of loyal and understanding customers, and a great management team, which is, again, an asset that we can capitalize on. So we have opportunities to grow, and really, it's an exciting phase for us to be in. And the sort of the 10-year mark is kind of, there's been Andina 1.0, and now we're looking for that, that strategy about this next phase of growth. So I want to take a pause here and just talk a little bit about restaurants as in general, because they're a vital part of the small business landscape, the entrepreneurial landscape. They're a major stepping stone, in particular for minority entrepreneurs, getting into the business. A lot of immigrant families come here with a particular skill set that may not immediately transfer into a job in the domain in which they first worked. They may be a lawyer from Pakistan who can't transfer that skill, and so restaurants represent a real opportunity for them to actually be their own boss. But restaurants are not an easy business. They're not a typical, there are good reasons why they don't necessarily attract, venture capital, for example. They're incredibly low margin, very high risk, intense competition, very high labor costs. It's a fixed cost business with a sales drop, if you want to think about it that way. So, and it really is what they are. And yet, operationally, they're also very difficult to manage because they're two businesses basically squished together, two types of business. A light manufacturing enterprise on one hand, raw product comes in, you break it down, you package it, and move it off the line. And then a personal valet service, right, on the other. And these two sides, anyone who's worked in restaurants, and I'm sure many of you have, these two sides of the house, so to speak, making them actually fit together can be a daily challenge. Restaurants, I think, the growth path for most restaurants is, develop a concept, franchise it. Basically, you externalize the costs of expansion to the franchisee. But even that path of growth is very, at the mercy of the credit markets because franchisees have to get, their own financing, et cetera. And the other path to growth, again, it's a few people or a few enterprises actually become successful this way. Chipotle would be one example, is they develop a concept which seems to hit on all the right themes or trends of the moment and really capitalize on them. Be very smart and judicious about their menu, keep it small, keep it selective, keep it high end, price it at a premium, and then get to a certain scale where you're attractive to private equity and they come in and help you ramp up. And if you're lucky, you get an IPO. And Chipotle is wildly successful. I think their current market cap's around $11 billion. And they started out as a burrito shack, in Boulder, Colorado. So it's an amazing story. Thinking about what this story might have in terms of relevance to all of you, there are a few themes that I wanted to draw out that I think might be useful. The first is the theme of authenticity, which I know has been talked about before and touched on, which I know is something of a buzzword these days, particularly in the age of social media, because social media has changed the way in which we think about ourselves and represent ourselves. So authenticity really is a form of competitive advantage, if you will. It's a way that you can tell your story better, right? It puts pressure on creating a coherent and believable narrative. And we've heard that before about how when customers buy into a product, they're buying, of course, the story. They're buying the why you're doing this. So I completely support that point of view. The second theme is one of integration, which I've mentioned is one that was personal value to me growing up and trying to integrate these two parts of my family together. But I also think it's of special importance for minority and ethnic entrepreneurs if they can find a means, again, to translate an authentic cultural story through a branded product or service for a broader audience. I think the shift in the landscape now towards prizing authenticity is really a major shift in support of minorities and ethnic communities. And I think it's something they haven't necessarily taken advantage of. I think it's a new route to development. And the third theme, I would say, that brings together the first two, is community, which I'm sure the following food speakers, Lisa Sedler, Mike Thielen, speaking later today, will touch on. Because when we talk about food, particularly in this foodie city, what we are really talking about is community. That food represents and is a powerful symbol for our collective longing for the things that we need in our daily lives, in some dose, right? Nature, connection back to our rural heritage, ultimately, our sense of place in this ecosystem that we live in. And because food is a symbol, I'll leave you with this thought, restaurants have a vital role to play in giving food back its symbolic power. They decommoditize food. That's what restaurants do. They give us a new context in which to appreciate it and to develop a more nuanced and sophisticated relationship to it. So in that sense, restaurants are literal but also metaphorical tastemakers. And I think about, on an ingredient level, what Wolfgang Puck basically did to arugula, right? Started serving it in his LA restaurants. The next, fast forward a few years, and now there are thousands of acres being plowed up in the Salinas Valley.
Responsible for that.
Yeah, yeah. And then of course, I just got my morning coffee at Starbucks. That's a classic example. A distilling and a packaging of the essence of Italian coffee culture, and you roll that out in a nice way, and you have a very successful enterprise. So I know my time's up, but basically all of that segues into what we're trying to do now with Andina, which is to develop it as a social enterprise. Because of its mission-driven nature, because of its family business nature, we are in the process of certifying as B Corp in order to sort of more formalize, our intention behind the business. So with that, I'm happy to talk with anyone afterwards, and thank you very much again.
Thank you.